Hi, I'm Riley,
I am Evan,
and this is the Grey Line Podcast.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the third episode of the Grey Line Podcast, where today we are discussing something that is in line with the things that we've been talking about previously. And so, without further ado, here we are, the hollow moon theory. Now, the moon has been in the sky for as long as we can remember, and there are just a few things about it that seem either a little bit too good to be true or they just seem a little bit off. So, on that note, we are going to discuss those strange occurrences on the moon and what makes us believe that the moon could in fact be hollow. And as usual, Riley is joining me. Hello, Riley.
Hello, how you doing?
Awake, drinking coffee.
Yep. Uh,
So, would you
no.
like to kick off with what you know about the hollow moon theory, and we'll move on from there?
Okay. Well, honestly, really good discussion here. The fact that our moon has been around for as long as we humans have been on Earth, it's fascinating to know that this moon may be hollow. Considering out of all the history that we've been on this planet, nobody's really known too much about the moon as, further on down the line when we got to do some space flights up there and see the top of the moon. But the fact that there's more to this story really intrigues me. So the biggest claim with this is that this moon is hollow and it actually has an installation inside. Now, who knows really what it is or what it's meant for? But um, the aspect of it, you know, being this to me is intriguing because it's the whole reason why would there be a hollow earth, but also, or sorry, moon, but also the effect of what, how it all came to be in that sense. Now, for me, the moon's been here forever. So initially, was the moon always here? And now saying this, like we've heard about it's a chunk of earth that was broken off. To me, it almost seems reasonable, but then you got to think if this moon's hollow and people think that, then how could this have possibly happened if it was just a chunk off of our planet and now that's orbiting our Earth, So it's intriguing to the least in that sense.
Yes, and some of the tests that have been done on the actual moon itself, which kind of throw that theory that it's a chunk of Earth off a little bit, is the fact that the rocks on the surface of the moon are actually uh, older than the rocks deeper down on the moon. So that in itself doesn't really make a lot of sense. So geologically speaking, you'd have older rocks in reverse.
Yes,
Is that right? Is that right? So the older rocks on top or the older rocks on the bottom?
you think it'd be older on the bottom in that sense because it's kind of hard to explain. That's a good one because the moon doesn't have any. Does it have any wind or anything like that, or is it just one subtle? Because there's no atmosphere, right? So there's nothing really. Um, like the gravity obviously is way lighter. So like, how does these rocks compact into the ground?
Well, there is
Without some.
actually also talk at some point that there was viewed a mist cloud on the moon. I
Oh,
believe that
okay.
was by NASA as well.
Yeah. Huh. Well, yeah. Like even then, I could see maybe the outside rocks being older, but even then, like our planet, archaeologists dig up stuff that's way older than what we have now, obviously, and it's 10 times older. So it's kind of a neat idea on that. But obviously, you know, they've been taking samples of the moon, and a lot of the stuff that's on the moon is, some we do have, and they do say that there's some sort of water vapors or crystals or something like that on the moon too. So a lot of these things kind of go with it being a piece of our planet. But then again, you know, it goes on to more than that now that this whole, hollow moon thing comes into account. So to me, was it a smashed piece of our Earth, or was it sent here? Or it's kind of one of those things, I guess.
Well, I suppose when you think about it from the perspective of it being brought in here too, there are instances of ancient civilizations where they say that the moon was actually brought here because, they have stories about before the moon existed.
Yeah, yeah, and that almost makes now if this is a hollow moon and it does have an installation inside or whatever it is inside here, it's obviously they took a lot of, well, probably not as much time as we think, because in other places they could have technology way better than us, and to move a planet probably wouldn't be too much hassle for the other species that have this advancements. So for them to do this as fast as they could, we might not even have been here on this planet they even before we would have even thought, hey, this thing was moving, coming towards us, sort of thing. We would have saw something like that eventually if we were here. You know.
Yeah. Yes, and talking about the ancient civilizations that have also stories about this. For example, the Zulu people of Africa have a tradition that their ancestors came from another planet with two moons, and that one they were involved in a war, and one of the moons was destroyed and the other one was damaged, and so it was towed to Earth's orbit to get away from that conflict. But then there's also stories from the ancient Greeks. Zeus stole the moon from another place and gave it to his daughter. So I mean, it's not like these
Oh
are
yeah,
two completely separate civilizations that never had contact,
yeah,
but their
yeah.
stories are of a very similar nature. So that in itself is kind of a strange sort of coincidence, I suppose you'd call it.
Well, that comes up with the whole thing is like, one creator, in that sense, like somebody must have, not somebody, something created like the universe. This is like the whole theory thing. But if this is the case, why wouldn't they have thought, well, hey, why don't we make these planets that are movable? And honestly, in times like war or um like big catastrophes like asteroids hitting a planet, the best probably way to get off of that planet would be get to their moon. And if their moon is capable of moving, well, hey, you just basically made yourself a vessel that can take off out of orbit and go to another planet and orbit that one, and then you could create life on that planet as well, right? So you know it's kind of one of those things where it's the stories of it, but then when you really get thinking about you know could that be possible, it's probably one of those things that could have been, knowing our history and history of other species.
Also, on that note of using the moon potentially as some sort of craft, the crust itself is quite thick still. We're talking several kilometers thick. So if
Yeah.
you're traveling through space in, say, I don't know, just a standard human space shuttle, how likely is it that you'll take damage from, even small meteorites or any sort of space debris? But if you're in something that has miles thick crust around it, you've got a protective outer shell, and that's going to stop a lot of things that are hitting you. So if you're traveling long distances and you don't want to have to worry about impacts, that's a pretty good way to do it.
And you know what, you just brought up a good point too, because if this planet had been moved, okay, say from another solar system, um, that how come in my whole history that I've been alive in anyway, and I've actually have never really read anything else so far about impacts on our moon. Like there are impacts there. Obviously, there's asteroids that have hit this thing, But in my lifetime, I've never heard, oh, an asteroid's hit the moon, or we've always heard that asteroids are coming for our planet, and blah blah blah. But you never really heard that there's been big impacts on a moon. Now, my thing is, if this planet was moved, it had to have gone through our asteroid belt. It's it's the only illogical thing I can think of why it has all these impact crater marks all around it. And like you said, it's obviously thick enough that it's able to withstand this kind of damage while it's moving around.
Also, you got to think about the fact too that pretty much every single crater on the moon is perfectly circular. How does
Yeah.
that work? Because if you've got a rock or an asteroid or any sort of space debris hitting at an angle, wouldn't that create an elliptical crater pattern?
Well, yes, and that's the awesome thing about planets too, is because like from where an asteroid's coming from, you're never gonna see an asteroid bounce off a planet perfectly straight. Like not saying it doesn't happen, but for the moon to have this happen to it how many times? And every friggin' every crater on there is perfectly circle. Now some you'd have a trail, coming in from a side of the planet. Some burn off, some don't, and actually create this huge like impact trail, and then a crater. And I've seen this on some other pictures on Earth here, which you will see some crater marks that are basically just you can see where it hit, and then that impact from the end of it, and then it must have bounced off somewhere or whatever. But like you said, the moon seems to have these pretty circular patterns, which don't really make any sense to me at all.
Not at all. No, it's definitely a strange occurrence. Other
Yes.
things that I find really interesting about the moon, and also very curious, is the fact that what do they call it? Tidal locked, is it? Where the
Yeah.
moon is constantly facing the Earth.
Yep.
Now, do you know of any other celestial body that does that in our known universe? I can't
Honestly,
think of
there's
any.
well, there's I've never heard of it. Right? Actually, I don't even know if our own system. I don't know if all the moons that are in our system even have that. I know there's is it Titan, or moons on Jupiter? I know they do turn, like they orbit and they turn themselves. So
They
honestly, yeah,
also
you're right.
have,
Not really.
well, they also
Go
have
ahead.
elliptical. Uh, oh, my brain's not working. They also
Hmm.
have elliptical orbits around the
Yes.
bodies that they. The moon has a near perfect circular orbit around Earth.
Yes. Yeah, that's true.
I mean,
Yeah.
there's just these weird inconsistencies that question that this is a natural occurrence.
Well, that's another thing too, is there's um a theory about, the perfect solar eclipses the moon gives off when it gets in front of that sun. Now, and if any other planet were to get in front of this, like I don't know how many eclipses I've been through in my lifetime, but there's been a few where the sun and the moon align perfectly, and then you get that red, glow around it. But that, to me, that seems way too perfect of a circle to be something, not man-made to me. And as I know, as anybody knows, planets are not perfectly circle at all. Like there's way different. Like we have mountain ranges that almost reach, um, certain atmospherical heights, like Mount Everest and stuff like that. So you're gonna see a lot of these uh, direct, oh my God, I can't talk now. You just gave it to me. You're gonna see all these differentials in every planet that you look at, unless you're looking at Jupiter, which it is pretty much completely round, but it's a gas planet, right? But a lot of planets that I've seen, from afar, yeah, they look pretty circular, but when you get close enough to them, they're not. You can start seeing all the differences and everything, the terrain sort of thing. Where the moon seems to be round as soon, like anywhere. Like you can even look, like I don't know if the astronauts, like there's even close up pictures of the moon, and it seems pretty damn circular considering.
There is also, though, interesting theories in relation to the moon hollow theory being artificial structures that researchers have claimed to have found evidence of, such as domes, towers, bridges, and tunnels.
Yes.
That is kind of interesting from the perspective that for a relatively flat planet or a flat moon, you then have like these spire-like protrusions coming out from the surface. I mean, if it just seems very, again, inconsistent with what we know about the moon to have these very random spires that just poke out of nowhere.
And it kind of makes me think of portals, because how do you get in and out of a planet without not being seen? And it makes me think that somewhere along the lines, maybe these spirals or these artifacts are some sort of portal that lets ships in, from other places, and that's kind of what I'm thinking is what that is, because there's no other reason for those to be there, and it's not like the Apollo 13 mission went up there and just started building a bunch of spirals just for the fun of it. So those have obviously been there for quite a long time, and I believe that it's got to be some sort of way to get into the moon, because there's no like, but there is other theories about some craters being too dark and you can't really see, like some of the rovers that were up there couldn't even see in these craters, and I think they weren't even allowed to go into them because it was so dark in there. But who knows if there's even an opening there that lets you right into the hollow moon. So yeah, that's kind of what my aspects with on that kind of are, because it kind of makes sense, because there's a lot of other theories on Earth with these spirally looking thing, like stuff on the ground sort of thing you could see from the sky, and they believe those are portals too, that civilizations or other species use as a way of travel, either into planets or to other places.
And looking at the craters, especially the ones you're talking about that are so pitch black that you couldn't even see into. There are
Yeah.
astronomers that are recording close-ups of the moon, and you're seeing these strange craft-like, very, very bright sort of
Yes.
shapes moving around the surface of the moon, or at least it seems like it's the surface of the moon. It's hard to tell on distance. I understand that you're potentially looking at different things at different depths, but seems very much like, because you can see in some videos where it's in the sunlight, and as it travels around to the dark side of the moon, it actually disappears. Now that says to me that that's fairly close to the surface of the moon, because
Yep.
it disappears around about the time that it hits that dark side.
Yes. And like that too is metallic, and anything that's a metal, you're gonna get that shine off of the moon's surface, and as it goes around the dark side, it's gonna disappear because it's gone. That light's gone, right? And that's another like thing too, is like the dark side of the moon seems to have a lot more activity on it, than compared to our side that we see. So, there's a lot of things that tell me that it's being hidden. There's something hidden back there that we haven't even really um, explored yet. And I think back there, I think there's a whole other story to that part of the moon, because if it's hollow, I feel like there's some sort of installation, and I don't believe I believe it's something, but obviously I can't really say what would it be, because I have no clue. But I think there's more questions than answers, in that sense.
Yeah, and there's also a lot of chatter that NASA do know about what's on the backside of the moon. They're even saying in some circles that that there is no actual dark spot. Speaking radio signal wise, behind the moon, they're still able to transmit, and there is actually talk that they basically use that period of time to relay what they're seeing back down to mission control. And I think there was
Ah,
actually a recording bouncing around at some point of one of the astronauts describing what they could see,
yep.
and this was supposedly when they were in radio blackout.
Okay, yeah, I think I know what you're talking about, because they saw bases or something, and supposedly there's actual, yeah, pictures, or not pictures of the dark side, but close to it, that show these weird non natural, almost like base looking things. And it makes me believe that, there's something up there. It's just that they're hiding it very well. They don't want people to know what's going on. And that kind of brings me to the point, why was it like if it was traveled here, like we obviously somehow found if NASA knows more than what they're letting on, then they know there's something going on inside the moon. I feel like why would they hide, all of this to the public if there wasn't anything really going on?
Yeah.
So
All right. Now, some other strange things that come along with the moon, just while we're on the topic, I want to sort of touch on the. We've talked about the size and how sort of perfect it is for things like solar eclipses and stuff like that. It also makes a big difference to like the tidal motions of the Earth. It has
yeah,
calmed down our atmosphere a lot. Our like our weather systems are heavily affected by it, and it's actually made it a much nicer place to live. So, there's part of me that thinks maybe this was part of a terraforming process, even, to allow a certain species to live on a more hospitable planet. But outside of that, the density of the moon is something that's in contention because between sort of 1969 and 1977, NASA astronauts were actually installing seismometers on the lunar surface to record moonquakes. This is
yep,
for recording things like meteorite impacts and stuff like that. And when they actually purposefully crashed, I think it was the lunar lander module back onto the surface of the moon, they described it as ringing like a bell. Now, the reason that
oh
it
yeah,
was ringing like a bell is, they're saying basically that, light of gravity, the density, a whole bunch of other factors means that that vibration lasts a lot longer and goes a lot deeper than it does on Earth. But that being said, if that is actually a thing, like if it's reverberating like a bell, to me that says that either the internal structure of the moon is either very viscous, no, not viscous isn't
yeah,
the right word. Yeah, it has to have holes in it, or it has to be hollow for it to
yeah,
reverberate like that.
yeah. Um, yeah. The thing too is like I've, I guess it's like in a sense, like a guitar. In a sense, I'm gonna have to put it that way because it's the easiest way to put that. But when you play a guitar, when you actually hit the fretboard and that vibration, it sustains, right? That's metal on metal or metal on wood, but still, it sustains a sound or a vibration for quite a few minutes if you let it. I do it all the time. But anyway, but to me, the moon, when you think of that ringing is it's a metal, maybe, and it's not like the moon doesn't have iron or a different metal components on it itself. But to me, you think of Earth and you think of like earthquakes on Earth. You never hear ringing on here because of the amount of iron or gold or silver or stuff like that that's in abundance that we mine. So to me, it makes me feel like that ringing is actually a metally, almost a barrier, because our planet doesn't, you don't hear ringing, it's not a ring. Like obviously we wouldn't hear it with our ears, but to me, on the moon, it's like, it makes me think there's something metal underneath the crust, and when these seismic earthquakes or whatever happen, it's basically the metal or it's shifting. But
Yeah.
I've never really seen the moon shift. It always seems to be in the same spot to me. So my thing is maybe the inside shifts, but the outside stays the same way. Is my theory, and that could be the reason why it's ringing is because when it moves, it makes that like a metally ring sound to it. I guess
Looking like
that's
some
my
sort
theory
of
on it.
gyroscopic kind of system, possibly keeping
Well,
it in the same orientation.
Well, I am looking at a picture, right? Like kind of it. So it's kind of like it has these different like round rings inside that are pretty much close up to the exterior of the planet. So it makes me think that these gyros kind of like turn with each other, and whatever's in the middle of it is kind of what the base is in, sort of thing. Like I guess these pictures are really just kind of pictures. You really can't say that's what exactly, but I feel like that's kind of what's going on. Is there's something underneath that's gyrating and it turns. So it's got to be some sort of um I don't really know. Maybe there's a whole species living in here that that has their energy is based off of these gyrating things inside, that maybe they need oxygen or some sort of something going on, because I don't really understand the reasoning for this to be in a moon. And like you said, like other than travel, but for it to sit in orbit with a planet, there's got to be more to it than just a
Yeah,
travel.
I'm
you know
I'm very much of the opinion that if the moon is potentially hollow, and whether it was used as a craft or not, the fact that it stabilizes our weather systems, I think,
oh yeah.
is a huge difference for me. Like to me, that's more saying that this was a component of a terraforming process. Because I mean, you think about the Earth, it was fairly inhospitable with how much or how bad the weather systems were. Like it was,
Yeah.
there was always, hurricanes and tornadoes and wild winds and floods and all that sort of stuff.
Yep.
But with the moon coming in and being and calming that whole weather system down, that then allows an easier life for us, for animals, for any, if we have an alien species that comes down and lives on the planet, then they have a more hospitable environment to live in. So yeah, like I said, for me, it's more, even if they came in it as a transport ship, I think a large portion of the purpose of it, especially with its own, gravitational field, would be a part of the terraforming process.
Yes, I'm gonna agree with that perfectly, because um even what I said, yeah, I forgot all about when you said the terraforming thing. I should have remembered that. But anyway, yeah, that's brilliant, because it makes total sense. Especially when, if it, like we said, like another planet somewhere else is pretty much screwed and they need to get off of it, and if they can't find a certain planet with what they need to survive on it, it would be best to have another planet, or sorry, a moon, to orbit it to help terraform it so they could live on it. Now that kind of brings up the whole point of, like, maybe that's the reason now, why the moon's here, is because obviously we've had many other species here before us living here. So it makes me believe that they were hosting these other species to see if we could, um, like a test, running a test to see if all these species can live on this planet and what they can change to, help our species be able to live on this planet ourselves. So it's kind of like one of those things where we, you know, brought here as well, and then this moon showed up, and then everything was terraformed to our setting. Now, I'm not saying that this thing caused anything, or even then, maybe the moon can cause destruction too, terraforming and destruction in that sense, because it almost, if the moon's been around since the dinosaurs, and I know it was supposedly an asteroid and stuff, but maybe that was the reasoning for a moon to be here, was to make it so that, you're right, we wouldn't be they say that cavemen lived with dinosaurs at one point, but I don't know so much about how many humans actually lived without getting eaten by a dinosaur, honestly. So that makes me believe that maybe there's a reason why the moon is here for that, and it was for us to benefit without having all these terrible dinosaurs running around us, or whatever creature that would have been made in that sense.
Potentially, they used it to, wipe out the dinosaurs, as the theory suggests, with a large meteorite,
Yeah.
to clear the way for their own purposes.
Yeah. And like you said, if it's other creatures that are living here too, reptilians, or, there's been theories about that maybe that's the reason why, is that they wanted to live here without being seen, and it was easier for them to create an environment that was best suited to them. And luckily enough, humans got to benefit too because we're on top of the planet's crust. So it helped us, but it also is helping out another species too in that sense. But it also
This
could
this
be
might actually be a good segue too, just to say, well, if we're continuing on with different topics every time we talk about one, and leading into another one that sort of leads on from what we've discussed in the
yeah.
previous podcast, I think Hollow Earth theory and reptilians may actually have to be the next podcast
Uh,
topic.
Honestly, I figured you were gonna say that anyway. As soon as
Uh,
you brought Hollow Moon to it, I thought, okay, Hollow Earth's coming next.
All right. So how about let's put it to a vote. We'll put it in the podcast YouTube channel.
Yeah,
If you
good
go into
idea.
the comments below for anyone who's listening, um, if you comment if you would like Hollow Earth theory to be spoken about next, let us know, and we'll probably do it anyway. But it'd be good to know what you guys think. Anyway,
Yeah,
back to the moon.
yeah. I was just gonna say, I also believe maybe it's a weapon for other species. Maybe we're protected by this moon. Um, I feel like, maybe this was put there so that the species could flourish without having all these outside, um, maybe there's a species out there that want to take out this planet, you never know that. And, I hate to say this, man, but my game, I didn't really think anything of it when I did it, but the mantis species planet moves identical to what we're talking about, and the only reason why it does so is to destroy other planets that have the resources to keep theirs going. So it kind of brings me to that in an aspect for this because it just feels like, wow, how could I think of something like that? And then all of a sudden, I'm now discussing the moon, the hollow moon with you, and thinking to myself, wow, that's kind of weird. But also, maybe that's what it's for, is a weapon of destruction of some sort for something else that could harm us.
It was that subconscious belief that has brought you to build that into your game and development, I reckon.
It was sent to me.
Perhaps
uh,
they're trying to communicate with us.
yeah, right. No, but but it does make sense, and it's got to be there for a reason that we obviously cannot comprehend. And like the last podcast with the Black Knight satellite. Now, is this tied in with the moon? There's got to be. I just feel like there's so many things. Why would these two objects just be floating around our or orbit, and we don't really know why? And the
Well, I mean, touching on the Black Knight satellite as we did already, I mean,
yeah,
I think we did mention it, but I don't think it was really gone into in any depth. Was that potentially the Black Knight satellite was a relay station for whatever planet was coming beforehand. I mean, if that was the case, potentially the Black Knight satellite was put in place around, or that and identical ones put around multiple planets to find which one was best suited for that moon to travel to and terraform.
man, yeah, that's perfectly awesome. I honestly think that's the the case because it just seems a little weird that you'd have all this happening and then all of a sudden it's like we have this moon out of nowhere and what for. So it gives me some feeling that there's something to do with the Black Knight satellite as with these planets, and some civilization just has way more technology than us to be able to do this. And if so, it's incredible. Honestly, it's probably the coolest thing I've ever talked about. And if it's true, it's probably the biggest thing that's ever been done. It's seen by humans anyway. So it's really a neat aspect on that. And I do believe that if if it was a massive like a weapon of destruction, and like you said with the Black Knight satellite, it's kind of like one of those things too, like because now the satellite's basically useless. It's just sitting here, and then you got the moon, but now it's like the moon can relay all that stuff on its own if it's got its own, you know, I
Communications
almost feel
array
like,
system,
yeah,
all that kind
right.
of
So I'm
stuff.
thinking, yeah, so I'm thinking there's got to be some sort of there's more of an internal reasoning for it, like a living station. It's a weapon. It could be all of it in one, just to protect what we have here. And obviously, we weren't the ones that made this, but some species out there thought, hey, you know what? These would be good to terraform to get other species there.
So
And
that I'm a little bit on the fence about, though. I mean, you say that it's not something that we made, but at the end of the day, I believe that there is a strong chance that the human race
I,
didn't actually technically evolve here. I'd say that at some point our ancestors traveled to this planet, and we're
okay,
just
yeah,
that evolution there forth. There's talk about the Anunnaki and reptilians and all these different alien races, but then you've got
yeah,
like, the Palladians, which are essentially human. So
yeah,
it's
yeah.
not
I'm
to
gonna
say that,
backtrack on
maybe
that because yeah, yeah,
maybe this is our, maybe we are the legacy of the people that brought the moon here.
yeah. Now that you bring that up, that makes a little bit more sense. Especially like with the whole story with the Anunnaki, they came here in um these huge glowing balls or something like that. I remember a little story about it, but it makes me think though. Obviously, if they have technology for that, they obviously would have had the technology for this. And if we did come from another planet, it would have made sense if there was something going on, something at that point. I know that we were supposed to, the story is we're here to mine and stuff like that for them, and in that sort of sense. But it also makes me think that obviously we would have had to have had uh, a good place to go without having all these issues, being eaten or dying because there's not enough oxygen. So yeah, I believe that somewhere along the line, maybe not at our point, but our ancestors, I guess, would have had something to do with this being made. But even still, I still can still see that it'd be alien made. It's just we kind of help them, I don't know if that's, accurate enough, but I just feel like there's something there in that sense.
Well, to look at a perspective that's a little bit more scientifically bound rather than just speculation at this point, because I mean, we obviously have our beliefs and our ideas, but something that is scientifically provable, which kind of puts the theory that the moon is a piece of Earth that was essentially blasted off from an asteroid impact, was the fact that the moon's mean density, which is 3.3 grams per cubic meter, is
Yeah.
significantly less than Earth's 5.5 grams per cubic meter. So that to me also says that, the moon cannot be a piece of Earth because, it would have a very similar geological makeup, which it doesn't. So that sort of gives us now that segue back into this is from somewhere else, and that's kind of just one of the scientific perspectives that allows us to entertain these possibilities.
Now there is another piece of planetary. I don't know what it is actually, but they're calling it the second moon, and it's orbiting our planet too. But I
Isn't it
believe
like the
that
shape of a
was
potato?
yes, but I believe that's actually the broken chunk off of our planet. And they just realized, or well, they just discovered it not well, probably a while. Well, I don't even know how long because I just saw that too not too long ago. But my theory on that too is that obviously that could have been the broken chunk itself, and it's floating around our planet, and the moon that we have now is not from our origins at all. Even by looking at even by looking at the pictures and the geography of the moon and our planet now, it doesn't have an atmosphere, so a lot of things are different on the moon than they are on Earth. So you really can see it all on the moon. It doesn't look like anything that I would ever, you know, look at on our planet and say, "Oh, that came from the moon," you know.
Yeah,
And so that's kind of the thing for me is that I don't really believe. And then when you see a lot of the, our craters and stuff that is on our planet, a lot of them look a lot different from what I've seen with the moon. So it makes me think that yeah, this planet was either brought here, um, and it was used to manipulate other systems or planets in that source. And I do believe that like if it's obviously there for good, like it's a not a bad thing. Obviously, we've been here as long as it's been. It's nothing ever happened. But I also maybe think it's a defense, or a weapon because obviously we catch asteroids like NASA. They've been watching asteroids from everywhere and just to see if any's going to come or like life-threatening ones hit Earth, right? But maybe that's what the moon too was. Its purpose was to stop meteoroids or stuff from hitting us. But then I
Interception.
kind of, hmm?
Intercepting.
Yeah, intercepting, yeah. But I also think that's kind of off because the moon's on its orbit. It's pretty slow going around like it's faster than what we do go around the sun. But I mean, like, it just seems a little too much because it doesn't go faster. Like if an asteroid was coming from us at a speed of so many miles an hour, light of speed, or even half of that coming at us, that moon's not going to make it around the planet to that point to be able to say, okay, well, I'm taking that out. Saved you guys, but so there's things that it could be, it couldn't be. It's just there's a lot of topics that you'd really have to get into to really adjust what is going on up there.
Yeah, so I mean, there is one thing though that throws a lot of what we're talking about into question. The moon is actually drifting away from the Earth. And we've been
Yeah, I
talking
was going to
about
bring that
the
up.
perfect solar eclipses, and we've been talking about, being a craft of some description or whatnot. But if it's slowly drifting away, if it was actually a craft, wouldn't they be able to keep it locked in position? Or if it was towed here by a craft, that may explain why it's slowly drifting. I'm not sure about that one.
Um, I do have maybe. Okay. Now, our planet, we have rockets and all that stuff, right? Which is pretty easy to, when we have a pad, we can send rockets off no problem. It's easy said and done. But what if the moon has a higher power than us and cannot be close to the planet to start? Now, this might be drifting, but it's only drifting so many millimeters or something every year. Now, which makes me think maybe they're just trying to push away, or maybe the planet's expanding that we just don't know, and the moon has to move back further. Now, I don't know. I'm just thinking these are kind of ideas that I have, like, because it just makes sense. You wouldn't want to turn your, like, I don't know how they're using to, like, this planet must be using some sort of magnetism or something to be able to get it to move. So I'm thinking if it's too close to the planet, if they start turning on things like that, it's going to start doing things to our satellites, everything that's going on our planet. The magnet, our magnetic stuff that's going around our planet. Man, I'm off today, but anyway, you know what I'm saying. But I mean, like in that sense, I think if they were going to go and do this, they don't want to affect what's going on their planet if they were going to leave. But it just
Yes.
yeah, so it just seems a little weird though. I don't see maybe their job's done and they just said, okay, well this seems to be good and now we can go. But if they leave, what happens to the planet afterwards? Like the moon's helping us stabilize. So
Unless we're kind of some research station, they're just like, oh, let's see what happens if we just drag this back a little bit.
yeah, that could be it too. Maybe it's just a test to see how far they can, bring back the moon and or maybe it helps to expand what's going on our planet too. I don't know.
Well, currently, according to the good old Google machine, the moon drifts away from the Earth at a rate of about 1.48 inches or 3.78 centimeters per year.
Holy.
That's
Yeah, so
not
even
huge.
then, not huge, no, but still, give it enough time. What another decade or so? That moon's going to be farther than it's supposed to be, and even then, hopefully, it doesn't affect anything else that goes on our planet, sort of thing, and hopefully, it's for the better. I hope anyway.
But that
But
also,
even then,
I just sort of really thought about this. It just sort of clicked right then. There's always talk about us saying that the moon wasn't always here. Now, if the
yeah,
moon was always here, then how close was it to the Earth before it started drifting? Wouldn't it have always been drifting?
Yeah, right. Yeah, maybe we just didn't realize it, and we're just thinking now it's starting to go. It could have been doing this for so many years,
No, I
or
mean,
decades.
if the moon was here the entire time, and I'm talking like millions of years,
Yeah.
the moon would have been uh, almost touching Earth. It would have been that close.
Well, they do say that the moon was a lot closer back, even in dinosaur era. Now, maybe even before that, I could like that's millions of years ago too. So it's possible the moon was closer. It's actually a good thing. I might even Google that later just to see because I think at one point it was, and it's been drifting since then, and we just realize now that it's drifting, but it's already because I don't think there's any really record from any other civilizations that really say anything about the moon and how close it really was. But there's all these other. I think there was one thing about the red moon. Now we see the red moon in our lifetime, but back then they said the red moon was it was big, like it was almost as big as the sun, sort of thing, going around like the planet. When the sun would sorry set, the moon would come up, but it would look like a huge sun, just like the sun would. So that makes me think that obviously it had to have been a lot closer to the planet at one point to be able to get that nice glow effect to it. Because even now, you see the moon in the sky and the sun in the background. The moon's not that bright, and it's not as bright as it used to be when I was a kid too. So it's almost like it's losing that luminancy, the color or the glow, in a sense.
Yes, it's definitely a lot to take in and a lot of consideration. And maybe we could talk about this all day and still not get any closer to the truth. But I am going to have to cut
Right?
us short there
Yeah.
because we are over time now. I do
Right.
want to try and keep these podcasts to a similar time frame for everybody. But
Yep.
whether or not you believe the hollow moon theory is true, it is safe to say that there are a lot of inconsistencies when it comes to the moon, or at least coincidence. You've got flat bottomed craters, you've got perfectly circular craters, you've got legends that say the moon was brought here, and you've got that strange size differentiation between the moon, the earth, and the sun, and that allows for these near perfect solar eclipses. So, again, whether you believe or not that the hollow moon theory is true, it does have a lot of questions that need answering. And
Yes.
that is it from us here at the Grey Line podcast. We hope you enjoyed episode 3. Don't forget to jump into the comments section below and let us know if you'd like us to talk about Hollow Earth theory and the reptilians in the next episode.
And that's all for the episode this week. And don't forget, more on Grey Line, you can visit our YouTube or our website. Follow us on Twitter, and you can always support the podcast through Ko-Fi